Hello, and you are back in the Velvet Room with Jokerthefool. This is our 99th episode, and today we'll be discussing that they know Joe has to go, and globalism is only for the big guy. So, we're going to get right into it, to this, if I can get this article pulled up, which I have. So this is WLT report. Headline reads: Nikki Haley issues warning on Biden's possible replacement. And this is, Nikki Haley. And when I've talked about Nikki Haley, I've talked about her being a completely artificial, astroturfed candidate. So everything about her is planned. It was, very much something the Uniparty pushed her as the end all and be all to get Trump's base out out of the equation. It failed spectacularly. So Nikki Haley's presidential dreams were shattered extremely quickly by the MAGA movement. But she's still going to be trying out to say basically to be this catch for the Republicans that don't like Trump, right? Or the Democrats that don't like Joe Biden, right? She's basically that catch. And Nikki Haley warned Donald Trump in a recent interview. Democrats are about to spring on the 24 election. That's nothing. But some Democrats have also called on Biden to drop out of the race after his debate performance against Trump. So this is really what I want to get into. And this specific article I have pulled up isn't the most relevant thing. There's a Democratic member of the House of Representatives who's saying that Joe Biden has to resign, right? And of course, dumping on Trump that Joe Biden actually served this country, but he's just too old. Doc and I predicted this on Hump Day Potpourri, or between us. It's so hard for me to remember if the things that we say to each other are things that we say on air or things that we say before or after the show. But anyway, it's something that we predicted that they were eventually going to abandon Joe Biden and say that he was just too old, right? He did a good job, but he couldn't see it through to the end because he's just too old. He's past his prime, and that's really what they're going to be presenting. And now, after this debate that happened just about a week ago, it happened last Thursday. You've got just irrefutable evidence that Joe Biden's a senile old man. The White House is the most exclusive nursing home that's ever been put into existence, and there's no pretending that that's even the case. That isn't the case anymore. Of course, they're not going to go outright and say it. You're going to still have people like Karine Jean-Pierre and the Harry Sissons of the world who are going to defend the competency of Joe Biden, say that he isn't senile, that he's completely aware of what he's doing, that it's okay for a government to only operate between the hours of 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. Very modified business hours, right? That's perfectly okay. It's all good because the Antichrist Trump isn't in office, but he'll be back, and if he comes back, then everyone's going to be in concentration camps that disagree with him because the Supreme Court said that he was allowed to do that as long as he just says I'm allowed to do it. It's all asinine, but the thing is that the viability of Joe Biden as a political candidate is completely gone. The Democrats are beginning to turn around to that, or I should say the Uniparty is beginning to turn around to that, and they're really priming it for him to be eliminated. Now, do I think they're going to have an open convention and nominate someone else? Probably not. If they do, it's going to be Kamala. She's already on the ballot as vice president, so her name's already on it. So to take Joe Biden's name off. But what I think they're going to do is weekend at Biden's too. Desperately try and get that second election won, and as soon as it's been won, basically 25th Amendment Joe Biden and get Kamala in as president on that basis, right? I really think that's what they're going to try and do. They're going to try and do weekends at Biden's too, and as soon as they secure that second term, they're going to give it to Kamala, because there is no way that the reputation and the decorum of this country can withstand another 4 years of Joe Biden, right? Well, at least with Trump, he was bombastic and he was out there, but this illusion that he was actually the guy in charge was maintained a little bit, and it was more or less just the Uniparty just desperately trying to kowtow and shame everybody, and that had a lot of desirable effects of this polarization and everything. So they were fine with that. Of course, they wanted him out. They got him out with the 2020 election, which I won't get into that whole can of worms, but That is definitely not the case. They want to maintain control of the presidency, and they want to use Joe Biden to basically just be this, warm body like he was in 2020. That's all they needed him to be, and they just need him one more time. And then they'll just shutter him off into the basement, say that he's too old, and then use the 25th Amendment to get Kamala Harris in there. I think that's what they want. Now, is that going to be able to happen with how negatively people are going to respond? I don't know, but we'll see how this election plays out. It's going to be very interesting. But the fact of the matter is that Joe Biden, like I said, completely unviable as a candidate. Everyone's waking up to it. You're going to have people who are going to say that Joe Biden can't be the nominee, and if he is, that's a disaster for the Democrats, and they're just scrambling, trying to, not have him be the guy that runs. But I mean, if you have Kamala running, if you have, Gavin Newsom or anybody else like that, there's nobody who's going to have any sort of ability to give people. There's no cultural cohesion from any of these candidates. They're going to be a little bit more well-spoken, but I would imagine that swing voters would respond just as negatively, especially considering just how bad Joe Biden's policies have been for the country, economically, socially, culturally. Although, and a lot of this stuff is just continuations of what the Uniparty has been pushing for, right? With during the Obama administration and beforehand, Bush with the Patriot Act, all this nonsense that the federal government has done to just make the life of the average American worse off. And we're going to get into that. We're going to jump into the next topic. Do you not have anything else to say on that other than, just, wait for November. It's going to be a shit show. But we're going to get into the next article. This one is from the Daily Caller. And if you're still sticking with me, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, especially to the Substack. I know there are people who watch me on YouTube, and that's all well and good. But the Substack, subscribe to that if you like what I do. I think I'm less likely to be banned from Substack than places like YouTube, but and that's where I post all my content. That is where my presence is most central on the internet, is my Substack. But we're going to get into this article. It's from the Daily Caller. Headline reads, John Deere announces layoffs while moving production abroad. So John Deere announced Friday it will lay off approximately 610 workers between three of its plants in Illinois and Iowa. So this is John Deere makes agricultural equipment, tractors and combines and, all that sort of stuff. So if you work on a farm, if you do any sort of farm work, then you are using John Deere equipment. And also, of course, John Deere has been one of these companies that's been involved in these right to repair lawsuits. I remember Lewis Rossman, he was pushing for right to repair when these various state legislators, he was working with farmers, because John Deere is very much like Apple in terms of them not making their products meant to be repaired and easily user serviceable, which is ridiculous to me. If you're going to make farm equipment where you're in a rural area and it's going to be like 50 miles minimum to your local John Deere dealership, and you need to make sure that stuff stays operational, or else you won't be able to do your harvest, right? If your combine is out of commission for a week, your tractor can't plow for a week, that's detrimental to a farm being able to run. So if you can have the parts and be able to repair it yourself on hand, that's what you want. But John Deere doesn't want that, because they can't make the most amount of money off of you, right? And this is the reason why they're going to lay off 610 workers. Although, of course, 95% of their weekly net pay up to 26 weeks based on length of service is what they're getting. So it's a decent severance package. You post a profit of let's just say $10 billion in 23. John Deere cited operational costs and a downturn in market demand as reasons for the layoffs. It's rising operational costs. They've been doing all these mass layoffs, so it creates this culture of fear. It's very evident this is just corporate greed, and all these jobs are going to get moved down to Mexico, right? When Doc and I on Hump Day Potpourri talked about a Volkswagen plant unionizing, and was it Alabama? It was one, I think Tennessee, I think. But anyway, it was like, well, they are most likely eventually going to shut that plant down and move it to Tijuana or somewhere else in Mexico, right? And this is what John Deere is doing. So this idea of globalism and living in a global economy and having companies like John Deere that can operate multinationally is a huge problem, right? It's not like you have these workers in Iowa and Illinois working for tractor and heavy equipment companies that are based only in that state and sell only to the local farmers there. Now, would they have? Well, one, they don't have job security because they're scared that a bunch of suits are looking at a chart and it's gone down too many points. It's like, well, we got to lay off 50 more people, right? We gotta shut down that plant, build one in Mexico. Will be cheaper. The investors will love it. So there's no job security if you're working for a small company, right? And they're only their customers are local to them. It makes it much harder for stuff like this to happen, which is why you have this crony corporatist system that's been put into place, and it's going to stay into place because the people that be are going to keep doing this, and the people who have the ability to work and make these sorts of things, you can only find employment from companies like John Deere. If you want to do your own, if you want to do what John Deere does, there's a lot of hoops and hurdles you got to jump through in order to make stuff that can be sold commercially, right? You can, thank like the EPA and the USDA, and now, we've got the Chevron case that might make things a little bit easier to start a business, but with, licensing and taxation, all these things that the state does, that makes it hard for you to operate and run a business that, like what John Deere does. The people who can do that just, resolve to work for companies like John Deere, and John Deere, has them on payroll for as long as it's beneficial to them. The board of directors, the shareholders, the, top level and mid level executives. And then as soon as, like I said, they see, the stock price go down a little bit too much, it's like, well, we got to do layoffs, and we're going to lay you off. And then, you're out of a job and you're not in the mindset to make your own business. We don't have this, system in place where we can have, like I said, 10 to 20 companies that do what John Deere does, just on a smaller scale and for their local communities. That's not the case that we're in. It's people relying, basically insure the entire company. But if you make $10.1 billion, John Deere's probably got, a huge market share for, heavy industrial farm equipment. And that's, a hard, thing to just start doing on your own and establishing that marketplace and all that stuff. And like I said, you have the state that'll come in and say, well, you need a license for this, or, we're fining you this much, or, you got to pay taxes and all these sorts of things. It just makes it basically impossible to get stuff like this off the ground, to do, what John Deere does even on a smaller scale. And of course, you got the fact that, a company like John Deere that has literally billions of dollars at its disposal is going to be able to just squash competition like that as well. So really, this, globalism, where you're just centralizing all this power into a few, hands, whether, it's, hands that are these corporate executives or these government bureaucrats. They work together to make the rules and make the system the way it is, so that way anyone who gives a shit about the little guy, anyone who wants to keep people in good standing employment, build communities, and actually make a company that treats its workers like humans and wants them to be able to retire with dignity and all these sorts of things, it's a lot harder for those people to start businesses, and it's a lot harder for these communities to form around businesses like that. So this is really the thing, is that see more stuff like this, and this isn't indicative that the government needs to come in and get in the way and make John Deere do all these sorts of things. Of course, you'll see Trump citing stuff like this, like, I'm going to bring the jobs back. You need to get the government out of the private sector and let people who have the means and the know-how to do these businesses do them, so that way you've got like 10 to 20, hell, maybe even more than that, of companies that are making the equipment that John Deere does, and they're selling them to their local communities, and that would solve these problems, right? Like if you had the people in Iowa and Illinois having their own companies and those guys working for them, then the interest would be keeping them employed, making sure that those customers are happy, because people want stuff that's made locally. People want family-owned businesses, right? It's just the way the system is set up. It's basically impossible for those businesses to get off the ground, and a lot of those businesses that did get off the ground got consolidated and bought up by companies like John Deere, right? Or, they started off as like, John Deere's, company, right? And now it's this 10 billion, multinational Goliath of a company that's just going to buy up and squash any semblance of meaningful competition. And this is a situation that you got where you're getting people laid off because the stock number wasn't as good as it could have been, right? But that's basically it. That's my rant there. Hopefully you follow along with it. And if you didn't, thank you for listening anyway. Joker is out. Thank you for being in the Velvet Room with Joker the Fool. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe whether you're listening on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, or Substack. And be sure to subscribe to my Substack, velvetroompublishing.substack.com, to keep up with Machine to Man and all my other projects.